Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Vanicki. I'm the Assistant City Manager here at the City of Dunwoody. And tonight you are at the second of third plan, though there will be more, I'm sure, town halls and discussions about the city's finances and about its potential having a general obligation bond offer. And before we start off, I just want to tell elected officials that are in the room, Mayor Deutsch is here, Councilmember Price, Lockenberger, and I think that is it for now. We also have several staff members here. Eric Clinton, City Manager, is behind me. Richard Plato and Linda Neighbors, Finance Director. Chief Billy Brogan's walking up, and your name is Brent Walker.
That's correct.
Parks Director Richard McLeod behind, and Michael Smith with Public Works. To tell you a little bit about today's forum, we're going to go through multiple things. The first part we're going to do is go over the 101 on bond issuance. And Doug Gephardt with Davenport, our financial advisor, is here along with Roger Murray at Bond Council, here to answer the technical questions. And some of that is just, hey, what do we do? I mean, to cut to the chase on it, it's a voter-approved tax to pay for buildings and construction. That's what it is. We're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of that. That's the first part of it. The second part, we're actually going to update you a little bit on city operations, the millage rate, and finances in general. The third thing is we're going to go very briefly over the American Rescue Plan funding. The city received $18 million worth of federal money, and last night they actually had an extensive discussion on it at City Council, and the budget that you're going to see today is the budget that will be approved in the next couple. And then the next part, the last part, is a list of potential bond projects for us, okay? And again, this list is not a recommended list, it's a list to start discussion. So the goals tonight are twofold. It's to update everybody on the city and where its finances are. And the second part is for everybody to give input to the council members that are here about what you think about city finances and what you think about a general obligation bond. Two technical things about format. For the first part of it, informal Q&A as we're going through is right. Raise your hand if I talk too fast, too slow, said something that didn't make sense. If the financial advisor did it, really yell because I gotta get his attention to. He's a good guy. But what we want to do on that is just interrupt. Just please have us clarify. It's an open-ended Q&A. At the very end of the process, just for keeping it a somewhat formal, we'll give everybody that wants 2-3 minutes of uninterrupted time just to say what they want to about it one way or the other. The difference between tonight and normal council meetings is staff can give feedback because there may be some questions, i.e., would this park have grass in it or something like that? And Brent can answer those type of questions. And I'm not making fun of it, but no, just literally those type of questions. So we'll get back and forth on that. Everybody understand the ground rules so far? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to give the floor to Doug Gephardt with Davenport. And if you've not grabbed them, every single handout is out there. But the two he'll be talking from are a FAQ that looks like this, one pager at the top. It's City of Dunwoody, Georgia bond referendum FAQ, and the second one is a PowerPoint with Davenport and Company at the top. We'll be talking from those two documents. And again, if you got questions during it, just raise your hand and just call. You're supposed to stand there. That's what it is.
My name's Doug Gephardt with Davenport, and you can boo me too if I go outside the screen, so it goes both ways. Again, we serve as the city's financial advisor, advising on all financial matters, but particularly as it relates to capital planning and debt issuance that is being contemplated to make sure that funds that are being spent are done adequately, achieving the lowest cost of borrowing, and making sure that any debt being contemplated is within, prudent financial levels. So what the city is currently contemplating to undertake at this point is one of the options is a general obligation loan. There are a variety of financing sources that are available to cities in the state of Georgia, such as revenue bonds, installment sale financings, lease purchase financing, things of that nature. But what we're talking about today is a general obligation bond, also known as a Geo bond. That's the short slang term for it, is the Geo bond. So if you hear general obligation, Geo, those terms are used interchangeably. And Geo bonds are a very common financing structure and the most credit worthy of all the financing options that I mentioned earlier today. And it's something that's been done throughout the Metro Atlanta region, including but not limited to the city of Brookhaven. Just recently did the Parks Bond, Alpharetta, Milton, just to name a few that have gone to their constituents for approval of general obligation debt. So first I'm going to go through this FAQ, which has some common questions about what is a general obligation bond, things of that nature. So a Geo Bond is a type of instrument that is sold to investors, whether it be a bank or a public market, that is secured by the full faith and credit and taxing pledge of the city. It is the strongest credit of all the financing types. So that means, the stronger your credit, the lower the interest rate. And general obligation bonds are generally repaid through a separate millage or a property tax that is used towards the repayment of the bond. So a Geo Bond, it does have to go to the voters that live within the city for approval of the projects that are being contemplated. And so what the city will do is go and issue the bonds, and there'll be a repayment stream or a repayment schedule, and will levy the tax that is necessary in order to repay those bonds that are being undertaken. What types of projects can Geo Bonds finance? It's really pretty broad, as long as it's accurately described in the call to election. Any sort of legal purpose that the city has the power to undertake can be financed through a general obligation bond issuance. What kind of limitations do Geo Bonds have? There's really two main limitations. One is that it can't exceed more than 10% of the city's assessed value. The number that we're using for our purposes, the assessed value is roughly $4 billion. So 10% of that is roughly 400 million. So the numbers that we'll talk about later are materially lower than what we would call the legal debt limit of the city. In fact, just a fraction of that. The other limitation is that the debt must be retired within 30 years of the issuance. So you can't go any further than 30 years. Some other things is with Geo Bonds, it authorizes a not to exceed principal amount or par amount of the offering. And it does allow that you can't issue any more than that, but it does allow the flexibility to issue the bonds in one or multiple series. So if, for example, a $40 million bond is approved by the voters, it can be issued in 4 $10 million tranches, 2 $20 million issuances, or a single 40 million. So there is some flexibility in that. And the only thing that has to happen is there needs to be an intention to repay or spend the bond proceeds within approximately 36 months of the issuance. So that's generally the FAQ. This one goes through a little bit more of the numbers and the financials. What are the potential next steps? In there is a election calendar for November. So there are certain steps that have to take before a Geo Bond can be put on a referendum for approval. The next available referendum date is in November of this year. The first action by council is a resolution approving that call to election, which I believe is currently anticipated to be July 11th of this year. The next available referendum dates are in the spring of 2023 and then again in November of next year. So really 2 times a year where referendums can occur for general obligation debt. Also,
so would this be a separate election?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It would be a separate election question.
Question.
It would be a question.
Part of the general election.
Part of the
It
general.
would, that's what
Yes.
I'm, okay.
Part of it would just be a unique question on that general election. The other pieces that I'll just talk about, we'll go through the details of the numbers in the longer presentation. But they contemplate a few different borrowing options, 30, 40, $50 million. The assumption that was used is a 20-year repayment term, which is what I would call a typical repayment structure for governmental type projects. And the debt service structure is what we would call a level debt service structure. Debt service meaning principal plus interest equals your debt service. And so the payments will be level for the entire 20-year period, much like your mortgage. You know, you're paying the same every month. The city would know its debt service locked in, for the 20-year period. Additionally, in there with the estimated repayment, depending on the various borrowing amounts, it shows on the following page behind that the estimated impact from the property tax that a homeowner would have to pay to help service those bonds. And for purposes of the analysis, we used 3 different home values at $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000. So that's the overview of Geo Bonds, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
So in terms of a Geo bond, and I'm not against this idea, so I want to pre-caution that any question might sound negative, but it's just the nature of the inquiry. What is the competition to a Geo bond? In other words, if we didn't use a Geo bond, which is one method of doing it, what other methods are available to the city?
Hey, Doug, if I could get you to do one thing, just in case the mic didn't pick up the question, repeat it.
Yes, okay, thank you, I'll do that. The question was, other than a Geo bond, what other potential financing options does the city have at disposal? The first would be a revenue bond. A revenue bond would be issued by a third-party authority, such as a public facilities authority, is a more common one, and I believe Dunwoody has a public facilities authority, where the facilities authority would issue a revenue bond, and the city would enter into a intergovernmental contract for the repayment of that bond. That type of debt is not required to be approved by the voters. So it's something that a city or municipality, county, whatever it may be, can undertake. Without that, the other one, and that would require the full faith and credit pledge. So they would be pledging, the taxes of the city. The other available option is what's called a lease purchase or installment sale financing. Really, you'd be, again, a third-party issuer. You'd be purchasing said property back from the person that's able to issue it. That one is what we call an annual appropriation credit or a promise to pay credit. And there's a little bit more of a interest rate or credit spread to undertake that because of that annual appropriation risk. So Geo Bond is the most transparent, the strongest credit, and the most common known issuers throughout the country issue general obligation bonds.
Thank you.
Let's say we only borrow the first 10 million in the first year. When Jay confirmed last week that it would be a separate line item on our DeKalb our DeKalb bill. So you'd have city taxes at 300, and then you'd have the Geo bond or whatever you call it at $50. If you borrow another 10 in 6 months, does this just tack up, or is there still another line?
I'll give that one, it's a billing question. It'll show up on your tax bill as city operations and city bonds because it's part of the same vote. It'll just show up together. So if we did 10 million and borrowed it in January of 2023 and 10 million in 2024, your 2024 bill, the number would change.
How does our city credit work into this? Because we are not rated now.
That's right. As part of the issuance, we would be advising the city and securing its first ever credit rating. Just based upon preliminary review, we expect the city to have a very strong credit score.
Generally speaking, what's the idea of roughly how much they would issue bonds for if we did this?
Yep, the three numbers, again, this is all prerogative of the council's decision. They get to choose what they want to call the vote for. But the numbers we use for illustrative purposes were 30, 40, and 50.
So presumably somewhere in that range.
Presumably.
Any other questions on the technical Geo Bond side of things? Pretty quick, if you did a good job. We'll move on to the next part of the entertainment. And it's actually something that the council got an update on yesterday or last night too, for the first time. So you're actually the second crew to see it, like literally 12 hours later or 24 hours later. Jennifer, question, can I share the screen on this?
I believe you can.
Okay. If I can't, I'm gonna break it. That's what I'm gonna do.
Sorry.
See if it works. So something on the screen above.
Yes.
Yay! Yeah, normally it doesn't work perfectly. Come on. You're right. Now you-
Yeah, it's good.
Perfect.
Oh, look at that. Okay, my luck has officially run out. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna go through this part, and at one point, one of the slides you're gonna see, I'm gonna say, please ignore this slide. Because the second presentation updates everything on that slide. That's called being lazy on my part instead of redoing it. I did a second presentation, so we'll get to that in a second. Let's go a bit on finances. I want to talk a little bit about your typical tax. Oh, by the way, Councilmember Joe Secondary is here. I introduced everyone, but I missed him. Your typical tax bill, just so you know, when you're getting your tax bill, most of that goes to the school system, okay? The lion's share, the great portion on both of these. And I technically show it two different ways because we have a thing called e-host now. So when you look at your county taxes, they dropped to 0 this year for the general fund and for Grady Hospital. But it's somewhat misleading because you pay an extra penny for it, is what you do. And that money goes to county, not to city until the county absolves itself of all taxes on those two funds. It's a very weird kind of thing, but we show both places. But the main point of this is to drill down two things. Your city taxes are 5% of the bill that you get each year. They're basically 5%. Also, for anybody in here that's a Dunwoody homeowner, and I would assume almost everybody in here that lives in Dunwoody is one, your taxes should be frozen for city purposes. Basically, when you apply for a homestead exemption, if you purchased your house for $300,000, you will be taxed at $300,000 as long as you own that house. So there are some people that I've about figured out that we're forgiving somewhere around 25 or 30% on an average home. That's what a typical home doesn't do. So even if the city adjusts its rate up, that would be the first time you would have ever seen taxes increase in the city of Dunwoody if you have been in your house. You are taxed just as much now as you were in 2009, just straight up. Second slide. This is one I'm going to say ignore because we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but the point of this is what drives the revenue, the value of the digest, the value of all the homes and property in Dunwoody combined. The thing you're seeing here is some years it goes up, some years it goes down. I'm going to show you what happened literally on Friday for the information you got. Okay, this is something I need to go through pretty slowly and it's math. And one of the citizens actually was asking me about it and remember every number from the last presentation. So I'm very impressed with that. Here's how the math works for your city budget. And I'm doing round figures here. But the city budget started with 25 million, and my finance director over there is going to tell me not to call it cash. I'm not calling it cash. Has 25 million undesignated reserves. Okay, so basically it's cash.
You got it in.
We start off the year with 25 million in that. Okay, then over the course of the year, we're budgeting that we're going to get 24 million in revenue, 24.2, and expenses of 28.1, with an ending balance of 21.1. That means in the budget as it currently stands, we're looking at what's called a structural deficit of 3.9 million. Now, this was planned. Every year before, the years before that, Dunwoody would spend just as much as it earned. But COVID hit 3 months into the fiscal year. So what did we do? Council said, okay, let's take a look. We instantly basically froze spending, cut budget, took the revenue and decreased it 25%. Because in March of 2020, None of us knew what was in store. None of us knew. And the one thing that did hit us the most in actual numbers was hotel and motel tax collections. They plummeted to basically nothing for a couple of months. It just, the hotels were empty. We all know. I will have to say they have come back. They are not at the levels of pre-COVID, but the industry is coming back. Now, what does this mean? This means that at the end of 2022, this year, we will probably have 8 to 9 months of fund balance in the bank. So that means at the beginning of January, you could run until October, is that right, September, and not have to earn a dime. A city Dunwoody size, most people should say 3 to 4 months is what you have to have. When Doug was talking about the credit rating, that's one of the key barometers that they use is how much fund balance you have. Dunwoody is robust here. That's why we don't consider ourselves in a financial harmful situation right now, because we planned over 20 and 2021 during COVID. Let's start shoring up money. Now we've got it and start using it. So it allowed us to keep things moving. In 2020, we did cut operations. Brent will actually say parks got shuttered in some ways. Things he was going to open up in Brook Run, delayed 6 to 9 months. But now we're fully functional. We're up and running. We've got moving on the green all the time. And those things, we are able to maintain the level of service that we were pre-COVID. So we're using and planning a little bit of fund balance to spend on that. It's not a bad practice as long as you plan for it. And that's what the city council has done. They planned for it in 20, they didn't need it. They planned for it in 2021, didn't need it. 2022 right now, it looks like we will probably use fund balance, which is why one of the other things that we're talking about has come into play. And that's the cap. Currently, the tax rate that you have on your house in Dunwoody is nominally, just the number, 2.74 mils. Okay, that's math from the 1800s as far as I'm concerned in state law, but it basically says how much you get charged. However, you as a homeowner are not taxed at 2.74. You're taxed at 1.74 because you get a homestead exemption, which decreases at 1 mil. Aside from the cities in the county that don't tax whatsoever, there's 2 that don't currently have a property. I think there's 2 that don't have a property tax. They use utility fees and other things to cover it, and they offer way less services. We are the lowest rate in the area, and 1.74 in this area of Atlanta is unheard of. Ask your friends in Decatur what they're paying. So 1.74 is incredibly low. Okay. However, the city's charter, when it was created, allowed an increase up to 3.04 without voter approval. That's how it's written in the charter and written also in the code section. And so the council by vote can raise it to 3.04. This would generate just about $1 million worth of additional funding for the city. That $4 million gap would decrease by $1 million. Done. Also, take a look at the 3 typical houses, 400, 500, and 600. That increase to the cap, $45 to $69. That's all it would be, and it would shore up the fund balance. Now, one of the things that we've done is we've also projected internally some more additional revenues with hotel and motel. We've also gotten the digest, and we're going to show that. We think with this cap increase, and the new digest and the better hotel motel collections, all 3 of those combined could decrease that use of fund balance from 4 million to somewhere around 1.2. We're still not quite sure if that's the exact number, but basically cut it by 75%, which means that this would mean a structural deficit that is not immaterial, because 1 million is still material in a $28 million budget, but it's manageable. And it's one of those that short term, the city would be on good financial ground with those 3 going. The increase of the digest at 6%, which has happened, increase in the cap to 3.04, and the additional hotel, motel, and other collections. Okay, let's also talk about the Geo Bonds, if you put those on. Here are 3 different things, and I'm showing what I call low, middle, and high bonds. They're 30, 40, and $50 million. And this is one where, just if you want to know how geeky finance people can get, we all turn to what interest rate we use. Just pick the middle one. I mean, there's a range of rates, and everybody knows they're variable at this time, and as spooky as the market is. But we picked the middle one. So on all of them, houses of 400,000 to 600,000, you see smaller bonds would be around $87 to $153. Your higher bond, your 50 million, would be 144 to 221. And for comparison purposes, your tax rate of current bill is between 251 and 350. So you kind of see there's lots of different combinations, but your bonds, depending upon the size of your house and everything, could be between $90 to $200 a year to do a $30 to $50 million bond. Now, what if it was double? Let's show you what the bill would be like. And we did the typical thing, we picked the middle. So current tax bill, these houses are between 251 and 390. Increasing the cap will be 45 to 69. A $40 million bond would be between 116 and 117, meaning your total bill, if the city raised to the cap and also issued a $40 million bond, would be somewhere between $400 and $636. That's how much you would be paying for the operations of the city with a police department, a parks department, a public works department, code enforcement. You'd be paying somewhere between $400 and $600. It's still incredibly low for the services that are there. It's well managed, it's well run. So that's kind of the quick overview on that. Any questions right now before I hop into the update? And I'll hop into the update. Stop sharing, then you do it right. I heard that.
It's not a beer.
Yeah.
I wish it was.
We can waive the rules for town halls.
I don't have enough to share.
Okay, everybody see the digest up next screen.
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to hear. Okay, here's the nice part about this. This is all good news. And I want to show some stuff just to kind of show how Dunwoody is built. Okay, this is the net digest of the city. When Doug said earlier, we're a $4 billion city. That's the gross number. We'll get into our discussions about which is like. I like to use the net number. It puts the exemptions in there, which we'll talk about in a bit. This is the value of all the property, your home, your boat, your tractor, and his business, all combined, all pushed together, and then divided by point or multiplied times 0.4 for some odd reason. Okay, but basically, it looks like it's gone up over the years. Okay, you just kind of look at that. That looks kind of nice. However, this is actually year-over-year growth. Over the 13 years of digest history we have 3 of which it decreased. Now, there are various reasons behind each of the decreases, but however, 3 out of 13 is a little scary. There are 2 years where it is called basically anemic, it's 0. So now we're up to 5 years where no or little growth, and 1 year where it's just very low. Now, the others are all robust. They're 4, 5, 6, 7, 10%, but we are so small, we have certain things that can influence us. Like one of the things we've realized as big buildings get built, we have jumps. Okay. Now we also had 2008, 2009, Great Recession, it's on here. So we as internal finance people never feel comfortable with putting a number out there. You make the average it out, it's 4.5, 4 3/4 a year. But to build a budget, you knock it down a little bit. We basically do it about 2% growth, and at mid-year find it a little bit better. And this year, is grown up to basically 6%. Now, there are 2 things on here. I'm showing which ones they are. They're the gray bar is commercial values and the black bar is residential. You kind of optically can't tell the difference between the 2, but I want to show you what's happening. Both those are growing. Everything's kind of growing the same. There's only one part of the digest that has been shrinking every year for the past 10 years. You know what it was? Nobody.
Motor vehicles.
Motor vehicles, that man knows it. You basically get nothing. Yes, we all changed the way we did tags, and all of a sudden every year motor vehicle plummets like 15%, and people, unless your car is like 30 years old, you're not getting that. We're not getting the taxes this way anymore. Okay, now let's talk about how the digest is built. Basically, it's 2 things: residential. All the other stuff is minuscule. That's the true value. We're basically a 50-50 city. However, if you live in a home in Dunwoody, you also receive exemptions. You receive a standard exemption of $10,000. There are some based off of elderly and income, which affect a few people, and they might get an additional exemption. Then there's 2 other exemptions you get. One is that $1 million write-off that we told you. And then the second is basically your property value is frozen. So they take off that part of it. When we add in the exemptions, the digest switches and looks like this. Basically, your residents are not paying less. Okay, it's a true fact. That's the way it's rolling. We have a city that's designed this way. It's been designed since incorporation. And this is about to show you how it impacts it. Your mill exemption, okay, these are the 4 basic exemptions. I told you there's the basic and then there's the senior disabled one. They're just basically about 8%, 9% of the total exemption. That 1 mill exemption is valued at $656 billion, sorry, with an M. 656, almost half a billion dollars worth of exemption. Your freeze is now at 552. Every year that freeze number gets bigger. The freeze probably next year will be like a second mill of exemptions in homes. So basically, not only are you taxed at 1.74, your house is probably frozen enough where you're taxed at closer to 0.74. Here are the numbers you need to start worrying about, and this is what's worrying about us long term. The 2 numbers are the percent of the budget that is exempt and the percent of homesteads that aren't taxed. This doesn't mean the home itself, it means the value. So I always say there are 10 houses on the street, 6 of them don't get taxed. That's not what I'm saying. But if you look at the top line, 58.9% of all real property owned by homeowners is not taxed in the city. We only tax 40% of it. That's could not design a city off paper from the beginning and be this way. The second one is inching up. We're in the 30s for overall. These are the numbers that we fear the most, because as bigger and bigger as that gets, we could have less and less taxes to do the services that are growing. And this is the graph that we're going to end with and then take questions off of this part of it. This is basically an approximation of how much money the city received every year from inception. The black bar, homeowners, the gray bar, commercial property. Commercial properties don't have a freeze, so more and more. In 2009, the city received about $2.88 million worth of property taxes from homeowners. In 2022, we will receive about $2.9 million. Literally change of 5 digits off a $3 million base there. And the city is now designed, and this is unless the citizens want to change on it. This is what's dragging the finances down. Is 11–12% of our budget is permanently frozen. Unless a house sells and a new owner takes over and the freeze jumps it up, that's the only thing that will change it. We aren't annexing, we're landlocked. Development, we do have some, but not enough to move the needle. So these are where we're sitting with the finances right now. And part of this is the council last night discussed moving to the cap, moving to 3.04 mils, which if they need to do it, it would require 3 public hearings, multiple notifications, wouldn't even be voted on finally until July 11th. It's the same date as the potential bond vote. But it's one of those things to discuss because the city's looking at its finances and starting to plan for the future, because we do have new areas that we've purchased. Austin, the Roberts Drive property, Vermet, PCE Park are all coming online in the future. And those are additional things. Now, we built them into the forecast, and it would be tough, but we would have to use fund balance every year. As you can see, moving to the cap mitigates some of that. Now, with that, before we go on to the American Rescue Plan, questions on city finances and things like that.
So did you say that the millage rate increase to 3.04 would require a vote? I thought the council could do that without a vote.
Council vote. So the question just to make
Council
sure.
vote.
Yeah,
And
make
that
sure.
would occur in
Yes.
July. Okay,
Yeah.
I misunderstood.
He asked whose vote it would be, and it's a council vote to go above 3.04, and the current charter says it would be 6.
Right, okay. I understand.
Anything else on this? It's like a well-learned crowd, or it's just not as entertaining. One of the two. Moving on next, and we'll go next to the American Rescue Plan funding. I hope I have it. I did not pull it up. Okay, cool. Okay, then I won't share the screen on this. Turn to one of your handouts, this one that's yellow, and my apologies for those watching online. The council went through this yesterday. The mayor established 2 committees. One of them is a capital prioritization committee, kind of call it the bond committee. That's what they're discussing. They're discussing what the capital needs of the city are. And the second is an ARP and grants committee, because we received $18 million worth of grant funding. Now, the council is,
Sorry.
I was trying to interpret what that was.
We've only got.
Okay, I got it. Anyway, are slated to receive $18 million worth of funding. The grants committee went through and actually budgeted all but 1.2 for a plan for the next 2 and 3 years off of this. Now, I'm not going to get into the arcane baseballs about it, but there's ARP 1 and 2. The feds allowed us to take 10 million and do it as revenue replacement, which we really said, well, we'll do that, but some cities are like running their police departments off it. We said, let's put it in a fund just like ARP, segregated, and use it for ARP-like items. In other words, we're not going to run the police department with ARP funding. We may run items out of the police department, but we want them still tied to the spirit and the intent of the law. What it does allow the council to do is when something's a little bit of a gray area, it's a little bit clearer because it's technically general fund. So within the original ARP fund, there are three things being budgeted. Going in order from top, PCE Park, Perimeter Center East. That one is actually an eligible ARP exempt under ARP rules for 2 reasons. One, it's tourism, hotel, motel related. And second, it's also an economic issue. The city raised the tax on hotel and motels to 8% pre-COVID with plans to bond that and build amenities for the hotels in the area. The hotels requested it, they wanted it, they go, we can recruit people, but when they get here, not much to do on stuff like parks and trails. So we looked at that and we determined that we were going to bond that. COVID happened, we did not. So this is essentially making it a pay-as-you-go feature. It's an eligible expense that way, and it's something that the hotel industry here has been looking at. And I think that contract's already been awarded and Rick has been working on that. The second one, the Wayfinding Signage, $500,000. That is for the perimeter area to have signage because you know what it's like when you get off the MARTA train, you don't know where you are, right? It's also a little bit with branding. This is another thing with businesses and the like. There's sometimes you need to do it just to make your areas more amenable to those that are visiting. We know where everything is, but your visitors don't. So working with that. And then the third.
Just while you're talking about wayfinding real quick, is it possible just to make a note somewhere that these scan codes, QR codes, that would be great to have on the wayfinding signs.
For those that couldn't hear it, it was talking about adding QR codes to the sign. And I saw Starling here a little bit ago. He's in the back. You can tell him he's right. But yeah, that's those type of things. But those are the type of things to make it so that everything about being a traveler is easy. The third thing is in ARP 1 is stormwater. And one of the things, not stormwater, but ARP was not really designed for the tax base of southern cities. I'm just going to say it's a little bit odd. The dollars don't quite match in some cases. But in this case, there is a need that it's eligible for ARP and we definitely have it. Our stormwater budget is probably, I want to say two and a half a year. Is Michael around? Stormwater is about 2.5 a year. 2 million?
Between 2 and 2.5.
Okay, we have about 2 and 2.5 million of dedicated stormwater tax that he can use to maintain the system and to keep it. But if he has a $500,000 project, it blows away 20 to 25% of his budget. So we don't get to them. So the council has looked at and is looking at using about 5 million of this to hit the big projects. And somebody made the joke, it's all the non-sexy stormwater projects. I'm still looking for that sexy stormwater project. So, but they're out there, and this would be using for the council to finally tackle the bigger things that we can't with the annual funding. Those would be your ARP because they're eligible, they're dedicated, they fit the intent. All the rest are ARP too, and a lot of them fit the spirit of the law, but I want to go through what they are because just to give you a little bit of difference. The other thing we don't have to do on these is all the procurement rules are state and local. Federal ones don't apply in this case, but we'll still, all state and local will be there. I have to applaud our finance clerk and communications department on transparency on this. The CARES page, if you haven't seen it, which is the grant we got before ARP, most transparent I've ever seen. Every single action taken by the council was on there. The monthly updates of where money was spent. You can go to our open checkbook. You can even see the checks that were written over it. We want to make sure we're the same way with ARP. So we've got the beginning of the website up, I think. And I think they've already got the budget on there.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So it's already up there for everybody to start seeing. When money starts getting spent, you go to open checkbook and find it. So here are the things that are in the budget for ARP2. 2 million of direct assistance and 200,000 of that has already been awarded to Corners Outreach for summer school programs this year. This is basically not-for-profit grants which will be competitively applied for. And we're starting to work with either a third-party vendor or the like and trying to get that distributed out over the next few months. So that will be money direct in the hands of some of your not-for-profits. Recreational equity is a broad category, but what we're doing with that is separating out $1.5 million to make sure that areas that are underserved or populations that are underserved with recreational opportunities are addressed. We want to make sure we dedicate this funding to people that are not, sometimes they just get overlooked. We do know we got to work on a plan to develop it, but that's the intent of the funding. The third part is cybersecurity, which will run eligible expenses. There is not a day goes by in any business where a cybersecurity threat is not real. And we can always upgrade. This is one of the few exceptions that we're allowing ongoing operating expenses somewhat. We're trying to limit them in here. Everything else has been a one-time expenditure. In this case, what we're saying is if it's an upgrade and then there's licensing for the next year, we'll pay for both of those, but we would have to absorb it in year 2. IT director has already started working on a plan for this, and it's basically we can mobilize quickly as this budget is approved off on it. But it's one of those things that we need to make the dent where we can. The third one is economic development, and Michael's working on a program with that all encompassing. Social services incubator. This is kind of an out-of-the-box thing. We gave some grants for not-for-profits last year and had a after-action meeting. We sat down and talked to them. What would you like? Now, they would all like money. That's true. But what would you like if you just had one-time funding? Because we kind of knew this was coming down the pipe. Location was one of them. Some of the most noble people you know work in not-for-profits, work with assisting groups. They work out of church basements and they work out of warehouses. And when people are looking for something, looking for assistance, they get told, go over here. That person's not there. They say, go over here. And then they say, go over here. Part of the goal of this is to purchase a property that we would rehab and then rent out to not-for-profits as shelf space for them to put offices so that anybody that needs help in the Dunwoody, Norcross, Peachtree Corners, Chamblee, Goreville area knows of one location to go to. And that way they go there, and I've even talked to the not-for-profits. The part of the contract is they pay rent for janitorial and upkeep, and they will rotate a front desk clerk. So basically no city staff will be there, but it will give us at the beginning of a place that could evolve into something along the lines of community.
If we share that wonderful facility with those communities that you mentioned, is there a revenue participation or expense participation from those communities?
The current plan, the question was there going to be revenue participation from the grant agencies we would have? That's what we're looking at is probably the rent would be minimal to cover janitorial, repairs and maintenance, and maybe a little bit more upkeep, and that would be it. We've also talked to the not-for-profits because in some cases, if the city had $1 million to it, everybody knows what it's like to run a capital campaign. If there's match money available, they can get their own people, and $1 million can become $2 million very quickly. So we will be working on multiple ways of that. Next up is police and public safety. This is for multiple things, and one of them was approved last night. We have entered into a contract with Viewpoint Health to do mental health clinician services with police. And one of the things that has gone reported but hasn't sunk in with a lot of people is our police officers respond to a lot of calls. And I'm going to use the example I've used in all the forums. They go to a domestic dispute and they settle it and then they leave. Okay, that's the end of it for now. There's no follow-up, but then 2 weeks later at the same location. This is funding that we can use so that the police department has clinicians on staff who can do follow-up where necessary. So in other words, those individuals that might need counseling or might need some other help have a reference afterwards. It's to stop the second call from happening. The first call is bad enough, but the second call is even worse. So it's something that we're starting up almost immediately, and we'll be running on it. This is another one where it's an ongoing cost, but we're going to try to run it for 3 or 4 years with some of this funding and see how it works. Because if it frees up the officer's time and prevents that second call from ever happening, it's working. Next up, police, public safety and lighting. We have a lot of areas of the city that we need to add more lighting to. There, either dark, the corners, we know where they are. We're gonna develop a plan and bring it back to council before the lights are actually put up, just to see where, but it's also to serve the areas that don't necessarily get served. Administrative costs, I will say we've actually kept the administrative cost for this and the grant before to a minimum. And I want to thank Linda Neighbors and my entire finance department over there, and Richard Plato. They did a yeoman's job of distributing the $6 million of CARES money with minimal overhead. This is $300,000 for the direct assistance. We all need help in cutting checks and moving money. I also want accountability. Back to the transparency part, 2 people, 3 people are signing off on everything. We want to make sure all of this is accounted for. But to have $18 million worth of funding and only have to use 300,000, at most 500 for administration, is awesome. City supplies and services, I will admit this is a catch-all. It seems with COVID and things, we're always coming across a $5,000, $6,000. This is for stuff that would be normal operations. The last one that's on here that's budgeted is grant writing. Dunwoody has a very small staff, and some of the departments that are heavy into grant applications, such as our parks department, has all of 5 employees. Well, it's hard to take one of them offline to do a grant application. However, what we're doing is going to do, one of our commercial vendors has a part-time person, or we basically use them part-time to help us with this. So this is one of those where the parks crew or the public works crew can put together the backbone of the information, and then the grants person can do all that I and T crossing. And this is one that should last us 3 or 4 years in this, but it's also one of those, I think it's worth its weight if we can get somebody with sea legs enough, because if we spend 200,000 and we get 2 million back, we can't get that kind of rate of return. The last thing on the ARP list is 1.25 of contingency. We never know what tomorrow will bring, so we'll hold on to that for now. So that's the ARP budget that council saw, and they'll actually approve it at the next council meeting. Questions on that? Okay.
There's a question.
Okay.
Where can I find these?
You know, this exact thing is posted on the website, and as soon as I finish it up, the narrative with it will be on there too for the next council. So it'll be on the agenda, the June 13th meeting. When that agenda is posted, it'll be there, but we should have it out pretty shortly. What he said. Okay, that's the ARP fund. Any more questions? Okay, now we're going to go up and let's just go with this one. I'm not going to put it on the screen, but if Britt and Michael could come up here and handle this part of the show, it's kind of like the grand finale.
Will you stop the screen share so if somebody's watching, they will see you?
I've been sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Cool. Stop. Yeah, I'll talk about it. Rick, does you want to talk about it before we talk about it? Okay, this one page, okay, right here. There is a. Oh, share that one.
No, it didn't.
It didn't?
go off.
You know, I'm not the IT director, but you know what it is? I'm shadow IT. Stop. No. How about now?
Hey, it's fine on Facebook. We'll just be watching ourselves. So I think we're okay if y'all are okay with watching that. Oh,
Did it change it?
now you're back to just 2 screens on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay, so that's fine.
It's looking, for my screen, I don't know why it is. Okay. I'm just gonna say it's broken and we can use ARP money to fix it. Technology. Anyway, okay. What you have right here, this one pager right here, has a very big, long disclaimer at the top. It's not a bond list. Bond list of projects that are going to be voted on. List of potential projects that might be discussed for bond issues. The reason this was generated, and give you the impetus behind it, the city council has done a wonderful thing over the past 3 years. 3 years ago, we did not have a capital plan. We had lots of things on shelves that we pointed at and we said we'd like to do. So what they did was 3 years ago, city council actually put together a funded CIP. So for 5 years, Brent and Michael know what they can do. They know what they have the money to do. It's 5 years projections and things can change. But it gave us a list of 100 projects that we'd like to do and never got around to. City actually formed committees to rank those. It helped them with the process. So we said, oh, let's start looking at that for potential bonds. So we started looking at it, and the list is really long. There's lots of needs and wants. So the committee in charge of it charged us with this. come up with something more digestible, something that we can build in the next 3 years. This is, I call it a very quick and dirty list. It's not all encompassing. Some stuff on here you don't need to worry about. In fact, I'll tell you the two you don't need to worry about. Where are they? Yeah, at the very bottom, there are two for the $1 million matches for the Art Center and the Nature Center.
Right.
Approved already, done with general fund funding. So that's on the list. We can discuss it, but it's being funded. But this is to give you an idea of projects that could be on here. Michael and Brent are going to go through them all, just to kind of describe them. And then you guys can do Q&A after that. And part of it is the end of this, the public hearing part. We want to hear what you would want on a bond. Do you want parks? Do you want transportation? Do you want public safety? You know, almost anything is eligible as long as you're building it. So we'll go with that, and you guys can split it either way you want to, just run through them, and then we'll take questions.
I'll run through all the park stuff real quick, except for the trail projects, which is the Winters Chapel Road to Primary Corridor, Primary District of Dunwoody Village and Roberts Drive Village to Brook Run. That's
Right.
actually Michael's project, so he'll speak more to that.
Brent,
Even though it's like-
can you get on camera? Sorry.
Like the lane.
Sorry.
I'll lean here. So the first one on the list, of course, is the Roberts Drive property. Most people know as the former Austin Elementary School site. We contracted Pond and Company several months ago to come up with some draft iterations of the master plan for that and to give us cost estimates. That master plan and the Burmack Park master plan are still in draft form. The council hasn't formally adopted them. So these numbers that we see there for the capital costs are based on that design. Now that number could go down if the council decides to modify that Parks master plan and change the amount of amenities that are there. In the Roberts Drive property, we have a softball field, splash pad, tennis courts, bocce courts, bathroom facilities. There's some wooded trails throughout the property too. All of that is on the city website under the Parks project page. You can see that concept if you want to see that. Then the next one is land acquisition. Of course, that's a big number. It's $10 million. That would be for any properties that come available over the term of the bond that we would be able to purchase for new park property. As you guys know, we did a Parks master plan several years ago that showed areas of the city that would go sit in park land. We try to keep a park amenity within a half-mile walk from every resident. We do have some areas of the city that don't have that availability, so we're always going to be looking for opportunities to provide some type of park amenity. It may not be Brook Run, maybe a small pocket park with a small playground or something of that nature, but we want some green space within walking distance to every resident. Skipping down to Brookfield Park Phase 2. As all of you hopefully have been out and seen Phase 1 construction of the amphitheater, great lawn, and soccer fields out at Brook Run. Phase 2 is continuing to complete that master plan that was completed back in 2016. It would include a new pavilion and sand volleyball court back on Treetop Quest. It has soccer pitches and tennis courts at the front of the park. There's a splash pad where the former amphitheater, or I'm sorry, where the former theater was. And then some improvements to the maintenance facility. If you don't know what the maintenance facility it is, it's the last old building left over from the hospital off Peter Road. And we've been using it since 2008 for public works and parks. And as we've grown, that facility has become inadequate for what we need for public works and parks. So that would be part of the Phase 2 construction. Also some restrooms at the dog park. And just kind of finishing that park out, getting it done, putting the cherry on top and just letting it be what it is. Going from there, Burmack Road, there's also a draft master plan on the city website for that. It's a neighborhood park with bocce courts, playground, pavilion, small parking area. We have an operations office over there now, in one of the older homes that would stay. So very much just a small, roughly about 4 acres of it would be developed with park amenities, and the other 4.5 acres would just stay wooded with nature trails. So it's a very walkable, nice, pleasant park for that community. The next one, Peachtree Middle School. This is Something that we discussed about long-term benefit for programming and for maintenance is currently we own the baseball fields that are at Brook Run. The school uses them during the day for PE, but we do own those two fields. They own the football field, and we use it after hours for our programming and on weekends, but it is still part of the school property. So one of the discussion points was to expend the dollars to put artificial turf on that field. So it would be in line with what we have for our soccer fields at Brook Run and also for our baseball fields. The play value of having artificial turf, the number of hours you get out of that facility versus just a regular grass field is exceptional. So that is part of the discussion. There would be some hoops to jump through to get the Board of Education to agree to that, but if I were them, I would want a nice turf field. Yeah, so, and it would be on the city's dime, but there's a lot of opportunity for us from a programming standpoint to put artificial turf there. Skip down to we talked about those two, to the nature center. If you're familiar with the nature center, the boardwalk that goes onto the wetland area and kind of wraps up into the playground has been a maintenance issue for several years. We've had to reframe it, fix it. It has tracks for the decking, but it has wooden supports. So as you can imagine, over time, it's sitting in the wetland, so it rots and collapses, and we're having to constantly repair it. So we did a study of that wetland area to do some restoration work in the wetland and also elevate that boardwalk 4 feet up off the ground and build it properly, build it with concrete and steel piers where it's not going to rot and collapse over and over. And it would be at a higher elevation, so water could flow like it should naturally in that wetland area, and it would tie directly into the playground. So it would still be a nice raised amenity, educational amenity for the nature center in that wetland area. The art center, library, if you've ever been over there, you could have bought the parking lot over there. It's a lot of new work. It's been a deferred item. Jay mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, it's been something that's been on our list to repave and restripe and basically redo that parking lot where you can get north to south without having to circulate back out of Shanley down, putting your life at risk, taking that left out of there to go back to the southern parking lot. So we have some plans to redo that parking lot and repave it. Waterford Park, hopefully some of you have been there. It's 7 acres that we purchased a couple of years ago from the Waterford community. Right now we operate on about a ½ acre of the 7 acres we own. And it's where the former swimming pool and pavilion were. We redid the tennis courts, we fixed the pavilion, we removed the pool, so it's a nice grassy area. And what we have scheduled is to build a playground and then also build several bridges that will connect the parking lot and active area into a nice natural surface wooded trail through the other 7 acres that winds down and connects to several neighborhoods and to Kingsley Swim and Tennis. So those funds would wrap that park up, finish up that construction, and make it a very, very nice piece of property. The last one I have is the Brook Run Park Veterans Memorial. I lied when I said the last structure left over from the hospital was a maintenance building. It's not, it's a Veterans Memorial. So if you weren't here back when the hospital was around, our Veterans Memorial is a former gazebo of the hospital. DeKalb County, when they bought the property, raised some funds and glassed it in and put a sign on it and called it the Veterans Memorial. And put some marble monuments around, and it served its purpose. And we've had a lot of good Memorial Day and Veteran Day events out there, but it is in dire need of an upgrade. So we've done some conceptual takeoffs, and I'm happy to share any of that with anybody that wants to see them. We want to open it up, open up the structure, take the glass out, make it inviting, replat it in granite, make it a very nice Veterans Memorial that we can be proud of in the city. So that's kind of all the projects I have in a nutshell. I'll be around after the meeting. Anybody has any additional questions, or if you have them now, Max?
Yeah, certainly. Brent, certainly want to thank you for the hard work. The parks look great. Well, I've seen it from the hospital. I used to call that hospital as a vendor, and to what it is now, it's just marvelous. So again, this question is in a positive vein, although it may sound negative. If the bond referendum were to pass, and let's say if all of these projects were to come to be, what would be the operational expense load on our budget? In other words, the capital X covers the cost of these things, but not the running of these things, and we already have it. Operational expenses.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a column actually on here that the additional operating cost is the far right side annually, what that estimated cost would see in our budget. Now,
Okay.
one thing that is not listed here is, the additional manpower from a oversight administrative piece of that, or the programming. Now, we do a lot of our programming through outsourcing and through contract, in structured contracts. So it's a third party coming in. So that's a wash for us. They collect fees, we get a percentage, they get their part, so there's no cost to the city. It's just kind of a pass through. But they're listed here. The market will change. So these are, of course, estimates, and we'll see where they go from there, but there will be an increase.
And Jay, you pretty much assured me that these expenses were baked into the.
There's, to give, his question was, we do a forecast, we've done an operating forecast, and whether or not these specific ones are in there. I put in a proxy for normal growth. If we issued a bond, I would update the forecast to probably include, because I would call it extraordinary growth. So assume everything that's on the bond list is extraordinary. So there would be some additional operational needs. And I've always said it, and for those of us that work with bonds in other areas, we have always said, if you build a fire station, you don't run a fire department, so I'll use that thing. I gotta hire a fireman the day it opens. He builds a park, he's got to activate it unless it's just a field of flowing grass. And then he's even got to mow it if it's that. So, so always think of it this way. And if the bond is put before the voters, one of the questions that will have to be laid out is, for all the projects listed on there, what is the true operating impact? And for assumption purposes, assume it's not baked into the current forecast.
Thank you.
On that same line, public safety and the police department being at the top of the list for most of the citizens in this city. Has anybody asked Chief Rogan, with all of these new parks and all these new multi-paths, how many additional police officers we need here, what we're going to do about supplying all of that for public safety?
The question, in case you didn't pick up on the mic, was, has the additional amount of police been accounted for in anything that's constructed with the bond stuff? We've not formally talked about it, but it's one of those things, and if you'd like to chime in, Chief, it's one of those things that's an ongoing effort, because he's currently got vacancies as is, but in anything that we do, he's reassessing every year the amount of manpower.
Yeah, we certainly look at manpower, any new parks that are opening, any new developments, such as High Street coming in, Campus 244, and we're trying to forecast ahead of time. I know Jennifer's waiting me to come up here in the front.
Don't lean
Don't lean on
on
the So the question was related to police manpower and how we look at that for future projects. We certainly do take that into consideration when we're putting our budget together. If there's new parks opening up, or it depends on if it's adding additional staff, or the workload will add additional staff. We look at that, same thing for commercial development. So for instance, we have High Street coming in, and Campus 244, other developments, new hotels, things like that. And we certainly plan for the additional staff as far as our request to the council.
Any other things for Brent on parks?
So you've heard this from me before, but I wish you would relook seriously the 7 million for Brook Run. Brook Run is fabulous. It's fabulous, but let's not develop it to, bathrooms, your sod or your turf, excuse me. All those are great ideas, but let's not put everything we can possibly throw into Brook Run.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of phasing construction projects.
Yeah.
You
Well,
do
that
it
was
hard,
smart,
you see
yeah.
how it operates, see how the park the ebb and flow of the park and the usage of it. And a lot of times with these concepts, they're done
Sure.
many, many years ago. So the will of council now may not be the will of council then. So certainly they're in concept form, even phase 2 construction, it's in concept. And, this dollar figure could change drastically depending on what the current council wants to do.
And Brent, do you want to talk a little bit about the additional part-time park staff we've added?
Sure.
Just to have people in the park?
Sure. Yes, we added 3 part-time positions, 1 year-round administrative position, and then 2 night, weekend staff people that help people with rentals, that help keep us tuned in with what's going on in our athletic facilities, make sure people have the proper permits for what they're supposed to be doing. They help PD if they see anything odd or illegal going on in the park. They call PD or they call us and let us know. Make sure people are parking in the proper place. So they've really helped us expand kind of our oversight into the park during, honestly, the hours that they're most utilized is after work and nights and weekends. So we are growing. Thankfully, it's not just me running around anymore. Max calling me, telling me there's people on top of the theater running around, 10 years ago. So, and to talk a little bit about public safety in the parks too, one thing we do as we design the parks is try to make it where it's easier for PD to be able to come in, scan the area, see things in the parks. We work with them on the installation of flock cameras and LPRs within the park system too, which helps them not have to have a physical body there and still be able to monitor the activities that are going there. And then with the addition of the part-time staff, not only are they great oversight, but we're also able to enhance our programming. We have a lot more special events now, a lot more activities in the park, summer camps, fitness classes. We have the annex now that we manage classes and programs over there. So we do a lot of a little bit. And the good thing about how we do our maintenance is we contract that out about every 3 years. And we always include the park properties, even if they're not developed, we include them into that contract. So they know that they're going to have to take care of them. There's no sticker shock to them when we do open those park properties. And so, we get a very good value out of that. We have a very good company right now helping us with our parks maintenance. So yeah, we try to develop and build the operating budget to what we develop. We don't overshoot what we do.
Question. So I heard the 0.5 mile target. The closest thing I think to our house is Dunwoody United and Dunwoody Baptist Fields. I don't know if they're public access or not, or is there a public part to that?
Right, they're not.
So there really is nothing near us. Then closest thing would be about a mile, quarter mile and a half Dunwoody Nature Center.
Yeah.
Love the Brook Run, but you're talking about pocket parks, and that's something to think about.
Yeah, and so when we talk about park amenities too, and Mike's going to speak a little bit about the trail systems we're putting in throughout the city, and that is a part of it. You can get on a trail and run, walk, take your dog out, things like that. So we may not have a rectangular parcel park, but there is going to be access to some type of recreational activity, hopefully within a half mile or less from the house.
Okay.
Nothing else with that. Mike will go through the transportation ones a little bit shorter and a little bit on trails on that. And just for those that know, question came up at a previous meeting of whether trails are recreation or transportation. The answer is yes. You just have to be consistent in how you apply it. So in the case of the city, we will probably, even though Michael may be the one building them, they're really recreational in the eyes of the city for discussion on bonds.
Okay, the 2 categories of transportation projects that are on this list, one is sidewalks and the other is the bicycle and walking paths that we've been talking about, or trails. The first one under transportation on the list is the sidewalk program. We have a list of, the city, when we started, the council set the goal of having sidewalks on both sides of all the main roads in the city. And we've put together a list. It's on the website. You can see all the different gaps that we've been trying to fill. We've done about 13 miles since we became a city, and there's still several miles left to do. So this category or this project on this list would be to basically finish that sidewalk program. And then the trails and the paths, there's two on here that we've listed as things that we think we could implement in the next 3 years. One is the 285, on the 285 right away, the bridge from Georgetown, from Perimeter to the back of Georgetown, down by the Georgetown swim tennis. We put the bridge in a few years ago. We're building a path on Chamber Dunwoody right now, and this project would connect those, so that really at that point Perimeter would be connected to Brook Run by a path. And the other one is on Peeler Road, where we're doing design right now for a section of path between Winter's Chapel and the Windward Hollow Park. And this project on the third transportation project on this list would be most likely widening the sidewalk on the reservoir side of Peeler to get from Windward Hollow to Kelly Mill, to get that path closer to Brook Run. You got a question?
Yeah, that one's actually my dog walking path. And, I've been walking that for a long, long time. It was built as a linear park. And I'm a little bit confused. Maybe it's a city council question. We've got a proposed tree ordinance coming up. And that widening of that path, all those trees that were planted there, are protection when you're walking on that path. Yeah. And they're all gonna have to come down, as you might imagine, and they're now reaching their beautiful stage, their maturity stage. As a walker on that path, I would be very concerned with a wide path with no trees on Peeler Raceway, Road. It's really, I'm not kidding you. It's
we haven't really started any design on that, but I don't think all the trees would have to be removed, but certainly some would.
Just some sort of protection barrier. If it's not a tree, I hate to think we need a steel rail there, but we had one there, they got dashed and removed. So, that's a consideration with these multi-use paths. One of the things that concerns me is not so much the overhead on the police department, but overhead on 9/11. People are riding around on all kinds of motorized devices. They got the wheel thing, which is, I don't know how that works. If you're on a wheel that moves along and nothing else without knee pads.
Yeah.
So we have all these paths. I think somebody needs to take a look at maybe augmenting our EMS. Seriously, because it's, you got dog walkers, strollers, and the ball. Same.
Any other questions on the transportation?
With that, this is where we'll get into the formal part. My clerk made me give you little cards so that we can put in the minutes, so-and-so spoke. That's what it'll be. So I'll take them in a random order and just call y'all up in 3 minutes just so that we got open public comment. Have I just got one card? Just one card? Going once, going twice? We'll be here to answer questions. You doubled my workload just then. Max, if you'd like to go, 3 minutes.
Ladies first.
Well,
So,
she's gonna make you stand at
You
the
got to
podium.
stand right here.
Oh, no.
Yes,
oh, come on. Okay. So I really do believe we need to pay to play. And I benefit from all of the amenities in Dunwoody. And I'm more than willing to pay even double my my city property taxes in order to have even more. We have Spruill, we have the Dunwoody Nature Center. This Brook Run is incredible. We have the annex. If people are meeting there, it's a marvelous event space. So I hope that everybody understands that it's not a lot of money and it's very necessary. And I hope that we raise the cap and then go ahead and do a bond referendum. Thank you.
Only it was 46 seconds. You saw 2:20. Yeah, you have to stand. I have to stand in front of you. You have to stand.
So,
He's going big one.
Max Lehman, Dunwoody resident, moved here in '94, survived the tornado, was actively involved in the incorporation process. And concur exactly with what Sue had said. I'm not here to oppose this bond idea. I want to make sure it's done properly. Jay spent some time answering some questions that were tough, and so did Brent, and I really appreciate that. So I'm gonna try to help you out a little bit here, right? I got online and I looked at, disclaimers, other, and contingency in the business world is where you look for the problems. And so what I would suggest in our effort here to make this thing happen is to remove the word disclaimer and replace it with the word pledge within the legal limits that you're allowed to do. And instead of saying that this list is a partial list, maybe you can look at what Alpharetta did. Because I compared this to Alpharetta. Alpharetta just floated on, and their processes have to be the same legally. But they basically, instead of having a disclaimer, they had a pledge that when they finalized the list, we're not there yet, but when they did finalize the list, they said, council's got a process that will be transparent and open. And if we can't do anything on this list, here's what we will do to replace that item. So I think we can look at that language in Alpharetta, and it will make the bond referendum seem less scary to people. Because I read that referendum and I said, well, they're going to take $40 billion and they're going to rebuild the village. That's what went through my mind. I looked at this. We don't have to do anything on this list, and you shouldn't vote on this list. And we can use money how we want to use the money. And if you look at the grid pattern in the village, that's transportation. So that would be one of the uses. And, I don't think the council has an appetite for that sort of deception. It comes down to trust. It comes down to knowing our neighbors, and I just don't think that kind of thing would occur. But again, there are other minds that might think that. So that's what I have to say about this. Good luck. I am excited about this.
Everybody, I got elected officials here. Stacy's even stuck in the
I think
room.
somebody picked up a card.
Somebody picked up a card. You gotta go in front of the camera though.
I'll just make it brief in 90 seconds. Thank you for all the council's doing, and I'm definitely in support of the trails, both for the two functions that were discussed. We don't really have any parkland near where we are in Dunwoody, unfortunately, unless we kind of crash in the Dunwoody Baptist and Dunwoody United Fields. But I think if we had some extra trails connecting out to the other areas, that would be fantastic. So just want to say my support for that. As well as my daughters over there too.
With that, any more questions? Just open it any questions. Okay, if not, I'd like to go around the room for any of my electeds that want to say anything.
I'll go last.
You'll go last.
Thank you for being here. Your input is important to us and we are listening to all of that.
Catherine, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So much fun.
Everybody, if you stand right here, I know you can't see it, but we can hear you and see.
I thought maybe the formal portion was over, but hello. Hello from the front of the room. It's way better to speak up here. Thank you for coming and stay in touch. If it's not public speaking tonight, it's an email to one of us, to the staff. We're all here for you. Thank you.
Stacy, your 30 seconds of fame.
I would also like to add, last night, we added a second item for the police, and that is the additional flock cameras, the Raven system, which actually helps detect gunshots. That's going to be placed over in the PIB. I can say that, right? Because we passed it. Okay, good, because I just did. So we actually did two items last night that are coming out of ARP money in the public safety. So I'm actually on the ARP committee, and believe me, when we spent time and we're trying to be thoughtful and we are treating this money as a gift, and we truly believe like that the social services incubator is that what did Tom call it? Rob, in our meeting? I mean, it's a game changer to have that transformational, and just some other things that we're going to do. So yes, the bonds are out there, but the ARP money is real, and we are trying to be very good stewards of that and spend it to make an impact, not only for this year in 2024, but for generations to go.
It's a lot more formal than
We're not playing tennis.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out on a Tuesday at dinner time. Government works better when people participate. There are 7 of us. There are 51,000 people in the city. We don't have all the ideas. We haven't thought of everything we can do. So your participation, your input is very important on this issue, and really on any issue that comes to mind. We've all got email addresses. We've got phone numbers. We've got a professional city staff. Reach out. This is your government. We work better when we work with you. So I thank you all for coming out. If you have ideas and thoughts, please share them. I appreciate the comments we've had tonight already. Thank you.
Joe.
I don't have much to say though.
Oh, come on.
So Max, thanks for the talk about Alpharetta. I actually did a reverse engineer. Oh, okay. Or shall I, am I good? I actually took apart and I did a reverse engineering on how Alpharetta last year, because they do bonds every several years. I always look to other cities and say, how do things work? Look outside, the best practices, what else is going on in Georgia? How are they achieving success as well? So I put together a 14-page Word doc. I'll send it to you. I met with a council member and the director of Parks and Rec, Tom Lemon, and I went up there and we walked through the process and we understood that we are in the infancy stage right now. Well, we're getting feedback, right? And so we have a website. Everybody can go to the city's website. Right now, you want feedback, please send that to us. It's councilmembers@dunwoodyga.gov. Any feedback, any and all feedback, please. But we did look at that process and how they're backing into it. And I'm looking into June of, if we're backing into that July 11th date, I'm going to be looking in June, having more information. And the Alpharetta, I'm 1 of 7, but Alpharetta had actually put it on the agenda where the council voted on the project list before they approved what was going to be on the bond referendum. It was a series of votes, so it was transparent and it was all on the website. So that's right. And by the way, they showed this is a park and they're going to put X million of dollars, whatever. But it was like design and build and a reference to the master plan. It wasn't as a low level detail like we currently have for Austin, but it was still the concept versus a blank check. So I totally support having an open and transparent. And yes, we're just not a blank check. Absolutely not in the process. So please look at this, look at that, and we provide feedback. Thank you very much for being here on a Tuesday night.
Here, Jennifer. Is this right, Jennifer?
You're good.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming. For those, I want to make it very clear that our #1 responsibility is public safety. There's not a member of our council who doesn't understand that. And like mayors and councils and county commissioners across the country, we're all struggling with how we change the dynamics of recruiting for policing and how we meet the needs of our community in the time of the Great Resignation. And so no doubt that we are constantly thinking about that and prioritizing that. And so I just want to be clear that we know that it's a challenge and that we continue to work on it creatively with solutions last night, what technology exists that we can add to our resources. by far, I think the most important vote we've taken in 2022 was the provision of mental health support staff for our officers when they answer calls and for other reasons that they can help members of our community last night. And so I'm very excited that we have gotten that on track. And also I encourage you, I don't think Jay talked about it, I might have missed it. When you're at home, and so you're going to get property tax bills in the next few weeks, I guess. Assessments first. And in all likelihood, the value of your home probably will have gone up. But if you look in the corner, is it on the assessment or the bill? That's the bill.
The assessment is so wrongly printed.
Okay. So when you get your bill in the corner, you'll see your city taxes. And what you'll see is that your value is frozen depending on how long you've owned your home. If you owned it as long as many of us has in the room, it was frozen during the recession. And then you're taxed on 40, your city taxes are on 40% of that freeze. And so I just want everyone to understand that your bill is going to go up. The school board had an opportunity to roll back the millage rate, and they chose not to last week, which is unfortunate in my opinion. I think that financial resources are plenty. But it is not city taxes. We have not raised the millage rate. We need to raise the millage rate. So one of the things that I have said publicly twice, including last night, multiple times, is that we have to keep up with the expenses of the services we're providing. And so, and there is a demand in our community for more. Just the other day, a father asked a gentleman at our Kids to Park Day, said, why don't you have little kids recreational sports that the city is providing? I'm not saying we should provide them. I'm just saying that there are lots of younger families and older residents too who want more. And in order to meet those, we have to have the budget. And quite frankly, when we became a city, I don't think you talked about that. So the Carl Vinson Institute study said we could be a city with 20 police officers. Chief and I have done this act before. We started with how many, Chief? 40. We have 60 something. 64. Thank you. We are a city of 100,000 people during normal daytime hours pre-pandemic. And so, and then the parks budget originally was $300,000, which was essentially they were going to mow the lawn. So we spend $3 million, but we've added an extraordinary amount of amenities in a relatively short time. We are very careful financially. We are so careful. I want to be clear on that. We are not wasteful, in my opinion. So please reach out to us with questions and feedback. You know how to find us. We're pretty accessible. And I want to thank staff for being here tonight. I want to thank all of y'all for coming. And have a good night and a good week. Thank you.
And everybody, same show at the annex.
Yeah, tomorrow, 6 days.
Excuse me, can I say one thing?
Yes,
To
sure.
respond to that,
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Mental health support supports the police officers. It does not replace them.
Absolutely, and this is,
These people clearly understand.
yes, sir, it is
That does not help this gentleman behind me.
well,
It supports him.
okay,
You must give him the number of officers to provide the safety in the
absolutely,
city that we need. And
absolutely,
these parks that pass are going to cost him more time than that.
absolutely. We understand the need. We,
But we're not doing anything about it, the best I can.
Chief, I think do you have everything you need to recruit, Chief?
I didn't ask him if he had everything he needed to recruit.
Okay,
I asked him if he had everything he needed for the people that he's trying to recruit.
so that's a really
There are
good
people that
question.
want to be police officers, and there are people that would like to be police officers at Dunwoody.
Okay,
And I don't think you're giving that gentleman the support he needs.
I'm giving.
And I know he's going to say you do. But I'm just telling you, there's a reason why we don't have the number of police officers that we need. And that gentleman right there needs more support.
So just in general, we're not the only law enforcement agency that is experiencing recruiting and retaining police officers. Talk to any agency in Metro Atlanta area, They're the same. I talked to chiefs across the country. They're experiencing the same. So the council has fully funded our budget for 64 police officers. We're down. We have all that we need to recruit. It's just a matter of getting people in here to recruit. And we've seen an uptick in recruiting. I think I spoke about this maybe at the council meeting last night. But we've seen an uptick in recruiting lately. So we've got several conditional job offers that we put out there. We've got 2 female officers that are starting. One already started, and we've got another that's starting soon. I've got an interview tomorrow. We've got a testing next week, and we've got 6 already in the process, 4 of which are certified. So we've seen an uptick in recruiting, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to, get to full staff in the not too distant future. The mayor and council did change our hiring grid in October of last year, and also gave across the board raise to everyone in the department, and that included one in January. And so they've been very supportive. And, I continue to advocate for the needs of our department with the city manager and with the council. I just don't do that necessarily in public.
Right, and we need it. I mean, we're working really hard on this, sir. I don't want you to think that we are not. A few years ago, we started sending potential officers directly to the academy, as opposed to trying to recruit ones from other agencies. We work really hard on this. It is, like I said, our number one priority is public safety. So, and again, thank you all for coming. And please reach out to us if you have any questions or feedback on the project list or whatever. Thank you all.